I can remember, guys, literally, I could not put the book down. I ordered a pizza, put it on the floor, and my kids went and crawled and fed themselves because I could not even put the pizza on a plate. I was just under such conviction of like, what am I doing with my life?
Hi, this is Sean LeCount.
And this is Ben Lacey, and this is the Make Your Life Count podcast. Today on the podcast, we have Ryan Robertson, who at one point wanted to own Disney World, and now he works as the president of a missions sending organization. We hope you're encouraged by his story. Ryan, thanks for being on the podcast today.
It's good to be with you, brother.
It's good to see you. Known you for a while, grateful for you and your ministry. Now, I know a lot of people might know you and what you're currently doing with Reaching and Teaching, but can you share with those who maybe have never heard of you, kind of what you do, what your role is, and what your ministry is?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ryan Robertson. I currently serve as the president of Reaching and Teaching International Ministries, which is an international mission sending organization that comes alongside local churches as they send out missionaries to the ends of the earth. And we also work alongside local churches as they send teams of pastors to go train pastors around the world that are in need of theological education.
And you're the president of this organization.
Currently the president, that's right.
So you're the first president to ever come on this podcast. So we feel totally honored and privileged that you'd be here. And you're also Canadian.
I am. Now, we don't have a really cool kind of prime minister theme song, but maybe the editors can put in like the actual U.S. presidential theme song at this
but
point.
you also have poutine, which is great. Who doesn't love fries with gravy and just stuff on top of that?
Oh, it's true. Our McDonald's even have poutine.
Oh, wow. And you have Tim Hortons, which I think is fantastic. Tim Hortons.
It's okay.
Great.
It's okay. It's overblown.
So tell us this real quick. Were you always hoping to be the president of a mission sending organization?
Absolutely not. If you had asked child Ryan up to teenage Ryan kind of what he wanted to be, I wanted to own Disney World.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I wanted to own Disney. I loved how the business was run. I wanted to run it. I wanted to be Bob Iger.
That's amazing.
Fast forward to 2023, I would have been an absolute nightmare at Disney for all of their culture pushing. So
it's true.
The Lord, and I'm actually kind of bitter still about it because all one of my family members had to do was buy me one stock certificate, and I would have owned Disney. That's all I wanted to do.
Could have happened. You know.
So did that happen after you visited Disney? I assume you went there once, and you're like, I just want to own this place.
I just want to own this place. I loved the business model from an early age, and was just so attracted to like that Walt Disney guy was pretty good and creative.
Yeah, I think about that every time I go to Hawaii. I'm like, I just want to own this place. I just want it to be mine. So,
That's true.
Did you grow up in a Christian home?
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian home. Two loving parents who took me to Bramalea Baptist week in and week out in just outside of Toronto. And we had this amazing pastor, Stu Sylvester, who preached the gospel and was faithful expositionally. And so, yeah, I grew up in a church that faithfully preached God's word.
So you, throughout middle school, high school, were living as a Christian. No one would have been surprised, Ryan Robertson, to find out that Ryan was a Christian.
Yeah, I remember specifically it was an evening after our Christmas cantata. We used to do those back in the day. And my two older cousins in my room kind of during evening devotions led me to Christ. I asked them, I was just so compelled by the gospel that evening, and I just said, what should I do to follow Jesus? So remember very, very clearly what that looked like. And then I had like the typical, I think, experience of kids in church, especially where assurance of salvation is not preached on a regular basis. You're kind of always wondering, like, should I put up my hand? Like, was I truly saved or not? Yeah. But looking back, there was a true conversion, I believe, at that point. And then I was baptized way earlier than I would baptize my kids today, nor would we at Third Avenue. But by God's grace, just continued to strive forward. Towards my middle school, teenage years, we were in a very multi-national, diverse Christian school, just outside of Toronto, very, very diverse. And so I went to school with Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, a lot of the India-Pakistan issues that to this day exist were very present in our lunchroom, and we would have discussions about them, very aware of the differences in culture between the two and religious belief. And I would share the gospel.
Praise the Lord.
And was just wanting at that point in my life to be a pastor. So kind of middle school to high school, made the decision I wanted to go to Liberty University. and studied to be a pastor. And so that was kind of high school Ryan's. I moved on from Disney and towards a desire to be in the pastorate.
Yeah. So you go to college thinking, no, now let's figure this thing out. So you're wanting to go to Liberty, but you don't go to Liberty. What happens, and why do you not pursue pastoral ministry and instead pursue what you desired?
Yeah, great question. So was playing basketball a ton, played kind of the Canadian equivalent of AAU, and then ended up playing AAU ball out of San Diego of all places. And so that was a lot of fun.
For people that don't know, Ryan, you're like 6'10", right? Something like that.
I'm 6'6".
Yeah. Okay, close enough.
But way larger in girth than I was in high school. I was a skinny guy, and I used to wear. I don't know if any of the listeners even or watchers, viewers would know a guy named Keith Van Horn.
Oh yeah.
But that boy, man, he just ran the baseline with these knee highs, and I wanted to be Keith Van Horn. That was my style. So I was looking at, there were some other schools, kind of mid-majors, but I was just zeroed in on Liberty. I had met Dr. Jerry Falwell kind of in middle school, going to basketball camps, and I was just enamored by him and his personality. Yeah. And Liberty was it for me. Now, come high school, come 12th grade, I realized that being a pastor is more than just preaching from the pulpit on a Sunday morning. Sure. And I got spooked about all of the pastoral care that's needed from a pastor, and realized at 18, I'm not ready for this. I don't want to go to Liberty for this. Oh, wow. And so through some wisdom of an older mentor, decided to go into finance as my degree specialization at Liberty.
So you did go to Liberty?
Did go to Liberty.
Oh, wow.
Redshirted my first year. I ended up dating my high school girlfriend. Well, she obviously was my high school girlfriend, but I had eyes for her for a few years, and she's my wife now.
Praise the Lord.
And Erin was a year older than me. We had 13 grades in Canada versus 12, and she found Liberty compelling and decided to go there, and I was not letting her go to Liberty for a year with a bunch of American dudes who would want to date her. So I skipped my last year at high school because I could,
wow.
And went down and redshirted. And then I ended up never playing kind of regular on the roster after that first year. I just dove right into school and decided to walk away from basketball.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you go from wanting to be a pastor to going into finance.
Yep.
And I assume that you were successful in that, knowing you, that you were driven, ambitious in college. I mean, what ends up happening like during college and after college? Is there any desire to go like, I want to go back into ministry, I want to give my life to ministry, or is it mainly just I want to be a Christian who is in the business world? How are you thinking about all that?
Yeah, well, Liberty, they were really pushing the motto "Champions for Christ." So whatever you do, do it to the glory of God. And Dr. Falwell Sr. always had this motto: if it's Christian, it ought to be better. And so whatever we were studying, we were just really pushed on a regular basis to excel at it in the public market space. The same mentor that encouraged me to go into business finance, his name's Pete Cruikshank, he's a dear friend to this day. He arranged for me to have an internship the first couple of summers at a private bank up in Toronto. And I would every summer go and work in private banking, way out of my skill level at that time as a like freshman and sophomore. And then I became an intern at PricewaterhouseCoopers kind of after my third year. And a lot of finance folks go into banking, and again, Pete just pulled me aside and said, hey, listen, I think you're in finance because you want to lead something one day. And so if you want to lead something one day, you need to understand finance. Finance is the language of business. And so he encouraged me to pursue going and getting my accounting licensure. Wow. And I took him up on that. So we graduated in 2004, not 2024, and moved back from Liberty to Toronto.
And was Pete a Christian? Is Pete a Christian?
Pete's a Christian.
So yeah. Godly man, discipling you, giving you good counsel,
man.
Thinking about the world.
Yeah, it was just, honestly, my dad pointed me his way. They had served together in youth ministry through the years, and Pete was very, very successful in business. And my dad was an aircraft mechanic with Boeing, and just had the wisdom to say, I need someone to help guide my son through some decisions. And it's really easy to take advice from a successful person. And so I just, again, just implored by my dad, go talk to Pete. Whatever he tells you to do, you would do well to listen to him. And so Pete was a Christian. Yeah.
Were you at all tempted? I know you said that he directed you to go into finance so that you could lead something, but the banking industry, especially investment banking, there's a lot of financial gain there. I mean, were you really tempted to go that direction? Like,
oh yeah.
What helped inform that decision?
Yeah, again, why I ultimately made the decision that I did was because I trusted Pete so much. There was a much more luring opportunity potentially with UBS in the investment banking world. We had some connections through Aaron's family into some folks on the board and so forth. And at a young 22, 23, people are opening, like that's really what you got to do in finance and business is you got to find someone who's somewhere to give you an opportunity that you don't deserve. And so it was either kind of thinking through investment banking in like a London or a New York City or going to be an auditor in Toronto, which is way less interesting to a 22-year-old. Yeah. But we wanted to be close to family. That helped with the decision. And I didn't want to work 90 to 100 hours a week. I wanted to work 60 or 70 hours a week.
Okay, so just
so that was
quick
the decision.
application here. Would you encourage all the Christians in college right now who are seeking a career in finance to abandon all that to go be president of mission-sending organizations or go be missionaries right now?
Not at all. I think the Lord had me on a unique journey that only really made sense a few years ago, and we can get into that in a minute. But I would say that whatever the Lord gives you to desire to do, seek godly wisdom from the people around you to see if you're gifted in that. And then are there opportunities to do so? And then whatever you do it all to the glory of God. And I am a huge advocate for Christian college students to go and pursue degrees in the world marketplace and excel at them so that people stop and go, why are you so diligent? There would be just countless opportunities in work for folks to say, you're different. We would talk about Genesis 1 and creationism around the audit table, or why I chose certain lifestyle decisions as a Christian. And those all came about in the marketplace. So you have an opportunity to let your light shine before men. Yeah. So I would encourage students.
So I think it's interesting that you have a president of a mission-sending organization encouraging people to be just faithful where they are. Not everyone can go, many can stay, and you have tons of opportunity for evangelism and missions-ish in those places and locations, and you might be able to use that for the glory of God in ways you might not even be able to do if you went overseas. So we encourage you to hear that wisdom.
That's right.
And receive it. So you have a successful career. Did you get fired and you're just like, I guess I can just fall back on the ministry thing? Like, what happens?
Yeah, what happened? My 20s were roaring, all right. Listen, I wish I could say that I made a ton of good decisions in my 20s and my heart was always in the right place. We were plugged into a local church in Canada that we were discipled very, very clearly, and I'm so thankful for that church. Had godly elders. It was smaller at the time. There's about 4,000 people there now. It's called Hope Bible Church in Oakville, Ontario. When we started going, there was a few hundred people, and there was 6 or 7 elders, and I got to be in a relationship with most of them as a young guy. And they started to, as elders, kind of push and prod on different areas of my life, but I was still very much kind of won over by materialism, and my heart longed for more money and more things, even though I was active in my church. And I ended up in my mid-20s, just as we were having our very first child. We now have 3. As Avery was born, I became the CFO of a public company, way underqualified for that job. And the company was a distressed aerospace company. And the very first day I showed up, and it was like, okay, we don't have any money for payroll. And we've already cut payroll checks. Welcome.
Wow.
That's how you get a 24-year-old in as a CFO, because you don't have any money to pay anybody.
That's called desperate.
It's desperate. Now, 24-year-old Ryan, I would have said, like, wow, look at me, I've arrived.
Sure. Yeah. You got those
but
3
there
letters.
was probably, that's right. And there's like 2 or 3 dozen guys that have probably turned down this opportunity because they asked the right questions. So that got me into CFO work for about 5 years. And then in 2011, there was a pretty monumental occurrence. We were pregnant with our 3rd kid at that time. We were expecting, my wife was pregnant. We were expecting our 3rd. And I read Radical by David Platt. And it completely turned my life upside down, just like the house on the front of the book.
And what was it about that book that wrecked your life?
Yeah, I think David just did a really good job on pressing in on our desire to pursue the wrong things at time, and to lose focus on what is good and right and what honors the Lord, specifically with our life and our finances.
And did you feel like that was your experience at the time when you read the book?
Oh, totally. He was like the Holy Spirit was pressing on my heart through David's words, big time. And Erin, my wife, was down at a conference in Chicago. I had our two kids, who were like 1 and 3 at the time. I can remember, guys, literally, I could not put the book down. I ordered a pizza, put it on the floor, and my kids went and crawled and fed themselves because I could not even put the pizza on a plate. I was just under such conviction of like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
And even as I was turning through the pages, I found myself bargaining with God. Like, okay, Lord, I get it. Missions, like the gospel. Again, small group leader at the time, faithful church member, but my heart was for many different things, and just was idolizing role within the professional world, finances, and what we could do with it, and was doing things that nobody in their 20s should do. And like, I would chase after a golf membership, and then like stupidly realize I don't have any time to golf because I have like 2 young kids at home. So anyways, read the book, neglected my children that night, but it was groundbreaking.
And you were still working for that aerospace company, and at that point, hopefully they had a payroll?
They had a payroll by that point. We had just worked on privatizing the company. It should not have been a public company, so we privatized it, which was a totally fun experience to go from hundreds and hundreds of shareholders to less than 50.
Yeah.
And then I was also working at another company, which was an online language learning company, as their CFO. So kind of like dual gigs, trying my best to provide for our family.
And so help us connect the dots. How do you get from CFO to where you are now? What takes place?
Yeah, so I'll try and go on kind of double speed through this section. But a really interesting thing happens after reading that book and coming under conviction is the next week, my wife and I start looking for a new house, and it's a bigger house. I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience, but sometimes after we're convicted of something, there's an opportunity and a temptation to like forget that conviction and move towards something in the exact opposite. And so we literally had booked a showing of a house, beautiful house, way out of what we should have been doing. And the house showing fell through. And within 20 minutes of that happening, the 2 elders from our church called me up and said, "You need to come into the office." Now, I'm already coming out of Toronto to go see this house that now I'm not seeing. So I end up going to the church and meeting with these 2 elders, which usually when 2 elders are calling you up saying we need to talk to you, especially like Ryan in his 20s, like I was just expecting a beatdown.
Yeah.
But loving beatdown. But it ended up that they put a job offer in front of me, which was a blank piece of paper. And they said, "Hey, we want you to come on staff at the church, be our director of finance. We're planting a bunch of churches, and we're about to work on a $30 million building and land purchase and building campaign. So come and lead that." So that's fun. And it seems radical. 75% pay cut, totally radical. Let's do it. And at that point, I was reading A.W. Tozer, Pursuit of God. And just again, a chapter in that book, on kind of we put certain things up on the throne rather than God, and just, again, revealing idolatry. And my wife and I decided, let's do this. And I cried the whole way home from that meeting because I knew that, like, it's enough. I had to burn my idols. I couldn't even afford them anymore.
In 24 hours, you go from thinking you're going to buy this mega house, which is going to be totally dope, to being like, oh, I'm going to take a 75% pay cut.
Totally. And guys, honestly, if you talk to a bunch of us who read Radical in 2011, 2012, like that was David. Like David's words were like super
Did you go
powerful.
out and grab your goldfish out of your house and just throw them out and just like no more?
No, but literally my sister had to take over my lease payment for a Toyota Yaris. So I didn't get rid of goldfish, but I had to get rid of my Yaris and bike in the snow to work.
That's amazing.
We lived close enough to the church that I could bike, but we worked at that church for 7 years, and it was a great experience. Loved being on staff with those guys. Some of my greatest friends to this day are guys that went out and church planted, and I got to support them in a finance role. and loved that period in life.
So just to be clear, when you were driving home and you said you were weeping after making that decision to take that job, why were you weeping, and what actually caused you to still go forward making that decision, with that much pain?
Totally. Well, it sounds super cheesy, but what my life would have looked like rolled ahead of my eyes. Two different ways. Number one, all the things that I wanted to do that I realized I would not be able to afford anymore. So the country club wedding for my kids, the putting my parents into retirement and caring for them in the ways that I dreamed of doing, all of those things, I mourned.
So you were counting the cost.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. And just knowing, like, I was also mourning just recognizing God's grace in my life. Just seeing the way that, like, I was getting caught up in what the world gets caught up in. Like, make more money, spend more money, make more money, spend more money. It's meaningless.
Yeah.
And just seeing that this offer at this time was God's kindness. Like, I had just wanted to buy a house that I should not have bought. And not that buying big houses are wrong, guys, but, like, I was under conviction about my lifestyle. And then I went and wanted to go buy a bigger house. And it's just a kind of rebellious act. So just under conviction from the Lord of, like, what am I doing? Like, this is God's hand on me. I'm about to drive my whole family off a cliff because of what I want and what I desire financially. Thank you, God.
Was your wife on board with this decision to make this complete 180?
Yeah, she was. I think Erin also, if she was honest, like, she probably wasn't as weepy as I was. She's much more stoic than I am, but she had to mourn. Like, ultimately, it led her to having to go back to work. It was just such a drastic financial cut for us. But the Lord was kind, and He was good, and they were good years. I was super thankful for it. Lord.
So you're on this church staff for 7 years, what you said?
7 years, yeah. So a big part of my story in those 7 years, guys, is I read Compelling Community. So part of my job, I became the kind of overseer of the bookstore. We had erroneously sold copies of a book called Jesus Calling in the bookstore. And whoever was overseeing the bookstore had not read it. And so the executive pastor that I reported to, when he saw how righteously angry I was that we would sell that, I just did not think it was a wise book. Tim Challies had already put out reviews. He was like, "Hey, you want to run the bookstore?" I was like, "Sure." So I set up this great deal with Crossway where I'm getting, like, books to read before we put them on the shelves. And one of the first ones was Compelling Community by Mark Dever and Jamie Dunlop. And, guys, I had just started a young adults ministry at the church. A couple hundred young adults, just launched it. I'm very entrepreneurial, so I put this idea before the pastors, like, "Hey, I want to start this ministry." The elders are like, "This is great. We need to start this program for young adults." And then I read Compelling Community, like, the next week. And again, there's a theme here. Ryan's read books. I read books, and then, like, now I got to do something about this if I agree with it. So I walk into the executive pastor's office, and I was like, "Okay, so you know that young adult ministry that we just started last week? I don't want to do it anymore." And he's like, "Whoa, wait a second, what?" And I just said, "Brother, what are we doing?" He was very loving, very calm, and he's like, "Okay, just stop. Let's talk through this. Tell me kind of what you're being pushed in on." And we just had a really good conversation. I still ended up leading that young adult ministry, but through that conversation, the church agreed to send me to Southern Seminary.
Wow.
Meaning online, I've started to do MDiv classes. And kind of on the same trajectory as starting this ministry, I ended up on a board of New Tribes Mission. And so Gracia Burnham, who has been at the Cross Conference for a few different years, was a missionary with New Tribes. So that's kind of the cool connection there on this podcast. But was on their board, leading a young adult ministry, starting to read 9 Mark's books. This is kind of mid-2015 to 2016, going to T4G. And the Lord was just doing a lot of things in my heart, continuing to prepare me kind of for today. And so 2015, 2016, taking MDiv classes, getting prepped for I don't know what.
Yeah, I was going to say, so when you're going back to seminary, are you actually kind of reverting back to college year or high school year, Ryan, thinking I might go be a pastor?
No, I was really content in my job.
Okay.
again, love the guys, love the staff there. Coming under I would have some different ecclesiological convictions today than what I would have had at that point. And so we would elder rule, congregational rule is probably the biggest one there. And the pastors were really loving and caring for me through that, going, okay, Ryan's growing in his convictions, but we're gonna care for him kind of through this period and love on him through that, which was super gracious. And in 2017, I reach out to Boyce College at Southern and ask if maybe they would be interested in me teaching online in their finance program, because they had this concept of, we want to train up business students to go to the nations for the gospel. And I was like, hey, this is great. Missions, business, like, I'm getting educated at Southern. This would be a lot of fun. So I come down to Southern in 2017, meet with David Bosch, who's the head of the business program, and he encourages me to do doctoral work in either the area of business or missions. Summer of 2017, I meet Matt Hall, who at that point is the dean of Boyce College, and Matt says, you should do a doctoral degree in missions. And I was like, great, sounds good. So 2017 summer, getting geared up, we're thinking about doing a doctoral program, even thinking about maybe moving to Southern with that. And I had been training for the New York Marathon. This is a pretty interesting part of my story, but I was training for the New York City Marathon. I wanted to qualify for Boston. So no more basketball, just running. Trying to lose weight, and I kept losing weight, and I kept losing energy. And 2 weeks after meeting Matt Hall, I was on a trip with a short-term missions team from our church that was going to Mongolia, and I had to turn around in China and come back home. And I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the Lord, man, so now I've talked about the David Platt influence. I had been reading Piper for about 15 years, and John Piper was in my head on the way to China, because I knew I was sick. I had just had a scan. The doctor's like, I think it might be cancer. And my response was, but I can still go to Mongolia, right? And he's like, you might be able to manage your temperature and stuff, but I would advise against it. I still did it. And so I'm on a plane to Mongolia, planning out my funeral, because I didn't know what cancer it was. I just knew it was most likely cancer. And just the Lord was just recalling all of these Piper quotes, just resting in the sovereignty of God, sitting beside my wife, in tears. I'm in tears. Just, what do you do in 30,000 feet up in the air when you know you're going back to Canada to get officially diagnosed? And we came back in 24 hours of landing in China. I actually got a call from the Canadian government saying, like, why are you not leaving China? You were supposed to leave China. Where are you? And it was because I was on my way back to the airport to go back to Canada. And had about 6 months of treatment for Hodgkin's lymphoma. Through that period, very early on, going like, okay, Lord, like, it seems like doors are opening to do doctoral work. Like, what do you want? Like, are you not satisfied with the sacrifices that I'm taking? And my heart was really struggling in these moments. And what about my family? And are you going to take care of my family? And that's where all of John's writing on the sovereignty of God and the goodness of God and finding our joy in the Lord all kind of just came flooding back.
Praise God.
So good.
So do you still have cancer?
Nope, don't have cancer anymore. I've got some hair. So this Ryan version of me was just complete, like, hair gone, lost my eyebrow, like everything. Typical kind of cancer chemo reaction. 6 months of kind of a cycle of every 2 weeks getting chemotherapy. I had an amazing hematologist, oncologist, and I remember walking into her office kind of midway through treatment and saying, hey, I want to move to America. And again, leaving Canadian healthcare, I said, I want to do doctoral studies at a seminary. Is that a bad idea? And she looks at me and she goes, no, I think that's a great idea. You should do it. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you were like the one person I was expecting to say, this is a dumb idea. And she said, no, I think you should do it. You should fight, get better, and you should go do that. And so that really started the conversations with reaching and teaching, because I was coming down to do doctoral studies. I was on the board of New Tribes. New Tribes is talking to me about potentially being a missiologist in residence. But New Tribes and I would have some different theological convictions. So I was a bit of a guinea pig. Let's like, let's see what it's like to have a Reformed Baptist guy on the board. And they were willing to let me serve in a capacity for 3 years as I was getting my doctoral degree, working in business and missions. That was the goal. And at that time, I met somebody who was working with Reaching and Teaching, who had encouraged me to apply for Reaching and Teaching with them instead of going with New Tribes. And so everybody at New Tribes thought, hey, that's great. Let's let the Reformed Baptists go hang out with other Reformed Baptists. And so in 2018, moved with our family, raised funds in order to support our salary, and moved down here in June of 2020, when Reaching and Teaching unexpectedly ended up in a leadership transition period. And then COVID. So it's April 2020, guys. 1 month into COVID. We don't know what's going on with COVID. Everybody's wearing masks. And I thought there was this ironic twist of, okay, so these guys knew I privatized a company, the board did, and that I've kind of wound up other organizations that were financially distressed. Maybe they think that's what's going on with Reaching and Teaching, and all of that experience is going to. But I remember waking up kind of my first day on the job in this role and turning to Aaron and saying, for the first time, like liberty, finance, accounting, ministry at a local church, missions, education, all of it kind of comes together in a way that makes sense, that like we could not have written this. We just sought to be faithful with each thing that the Lord put in front of us every step of the way. And that was, it was super encouraging, because people would look at my resume and it would just look super weird. So you were an auditor, and then you were a CFO, and then you went to work for your local church and basically committed career suicide. Like, why? And then you went into seminary? For what reason? It all kind of made sense all of a sudden, and super thankful for that.
All those things that look like sacrifices years ago, all of a sudden don't feel like sacrifices anymore.
Yeah, or like just weird kind of dislocated sections of my life. All of a sudden makes sense. So even like leading a young adult ministry at a local church, guys, even though Third Avenue doesn't have a young adult ministry and wouldn't have one, like we have a ton of seminary students. I love that demographic of like, I want to make decisions with my life. What do I do? And that's one of the things that we love about the Cross Conference is you've got thousands and thousands of people in that stage of life. And I just want to hang out with them and talk about like how to make good decisions with whatever's put in front of you, and trust the Lord. So
it's kind of like, when you're 18 to 25, you want to know what is God's will for my life. And J.I. Packer talks about it, knowing God. Like, we often think that he lets us see kind of the train conducting board where we see where all the trains are going. But it's more like we're driving on the road and we're just responding to what's in front of us. That's kind of how God works in your life. And your story is like a perfect example of that. Trying to be faithful wherever I am, and yet God keeps throwing me these kind of curveballs, and I have no idea what he's doing, but I'm just going to embrace it and trust him and walk by faith. And it's just so fun to see your story, how encouraging it is. How are things going for you at Reaching and Teaching? How's the ministry been?
Yeah, it's been great. By God's grace, we survived COVID. And we honestly, brothers, in 2020, we did a bit of a rebranding in the summer. So when you've got folks flying all over the world all the time, it gave us a chance to rebrand. And we really wanted to kind of point out what we do and why we do it and where our convictions are. And again, taking kind of the business experience that I've got and saying, okay, so what do we do in the missions landscape when there's so many agencies? What's the differentiator for Reaching and Teaching? Like, who are we, and why would someone want to work with Reaching and Teaching? And so that was really the summer of 2020 that we focused in on how to clarify that. And then we thought there would just be nothing for a year or two, maybe ever. I was really we had 26 units around the world at that point, and I loved them. And I was so happy just to serve them if that's what the Lord had for us for the rest of my time at Reaching and Teaching, which I hope is the rest of my life, really, till I'm too old to do the job, and then the board gets rid of me. But and if the board's listening to this, they should just make me an emeritus, because I don't want to leave. I love what I do and who I get to do it with. But things got crazy really fast, really quick. And Rachel Ware, who is, I know both of you know Rachel, good friend. She had been a colleague since my time at Reaching and Teaching. She was the only kind of person in mobilization. I had went into a mobilization role, and then when I was promoted, it was just Rachel. And all of a sudden, her email just starts going crazy. Our website goes live. We start making some good connections. And then all of a sudden, things are really busy, really, really quick. And so over the last few years, our staff has quadrupled in size.
Oh, wow.
By God's grace. And again, kindness of the Lord. Full-time staff have to go raise funds and to support themselves. And by God's grace, we found people who want to do that because they believe in what we're about. And then at the same time, the amount of workers that we get to serve around the world has also quadrupled in the last 3 years.
Wow.
Was not expecting that. My very first board meeting, I told the board, like, hey, let's not expect growth in the next year. We don't know anything with COVID, and I honestly don't know if anybody's interested in what we're doing in terms of working with us. But it was just been an interesting season ever since then. And again, you think back to the business experience and going to get an
Sure.
MBA and all of these other things. You're like, where does this all factor in? But like everybody who's listening, going, wow, you grew really fast. Like there's issues that can come from that. Absolutely.
Sure.
And like all of my education came in going, okay, here's like the risk factors for fast growth. And we're doing our best to steward what the Lord's doing and seeking to be faithful in that.
Praise God. Love Reaching and Teaching. If you're thinking about going overseas, I can't recommend them enough. Our own church, we have supported workers who are with Reaching and Teaching and have only been encouraged by what you guys are doing. And just your faithfulness, your commitment to the local church around the world is so encouraging to me. Okay, so we've got, Lord willing, a bunch of 18 to 25-year-olds on this, listening to this podcast. How would you encourage them to think about, maybe they're thinking about going into finance or missions. How would you encourage them right now at 18 to 25? You love this demographic. Here's how you can best make your life count in this moment.
Yeah, I've got a few different weird pieces of advice, but one of them is if you want to go into missions, you should seek to get your undergraduate in something other than missions. That's counterintuitive to some folks, but there's a couple different reasons. Number one, I think it just helps you to have life skills and vocational skills outside of quote-unquote missions. So go find a degree pathway that could be helpful if you were to end up overseas and pursue that in your undergrad.
Are there any particular degrees that you think are especially good for missions, or just anything?
It really just depends where you're going to go. So if you're going to go to an unreached language group, a business degree is going to be super helpful because most often you're going to have to run a business to be in a situation like that for a long term and have a viable reason to be there.
Yeah, because some of the challenges now is you have people who are going overseas, they can't get visas. So the work visa is a huge help getting in country and allowing you to do the work.
Yeah, huge opportunity with the visa. So that's part of it. And then if you're going to a global city, so if you've got a heart to serve the Lord in a major city in a national language, go get a finance degree, go get a nursing degree, go get a degree go get a teaching degree, a degree where somebody is going to want your skill set somewhere in the world and is going to be willing to allow you into their country to serve their population. And so I would just encourage students to have really good conversations with career counselors about, like, could I take this degree overseas? And ask for real examples of what that would look like. And have you had students do that before? I would encourage students to think through that in terms of just their education.
So get a degree. What other counsel might you have for them?
Yeah, another piece of counsel is, and those of you who have known Reaching and Teaching around the Cross Conference and have talked with our folks, or you've read our stuff online, you know this is coming, but like join a local church.
Amen.
So I'm so thankful for the elders that the Lord has given me throughout my life and the counsel that I've been able to get and the accountability with our church for week in and week out. We gather together and we worship together, and then they hold me accountable for being a Christian and being a fruitful Christian and pressing in and sharpening. So go join a local church. And if you're not joined to a local church, you have no right thinking about being a missionary, because how are you going to do something overseas that you're not even doing here locally? How are you going to try and disciple people to do something overseas that you're not yourself doing here locally? And all of those excuses, like, I'm really busy, I just don't know what type of church I want to join. You think you're busy now, and you think you're having a hard time figuring out what church to join now, it's going to be way harder when you move overseas.
So true.
And just develop those instincts now. And then I think the third piece of advice that I would give guys is find mentors. Ladies, find ladies that are older. Find Titus 2 ladies that you can look to and learn from, and ask them good questions and get good counsel.
Super encouraging.
Ask them if you can be around their families. Ask them if they're married. Ask them if, like, hey, can I go out for dinner with you and your husband and ask you questions, like, about what your marriage looks like. Go find single ladies. If you're single and the Lord has you in that season, maybe for a season, or maybe go find single women who are older and ask them all of those hard questions. And same with the guys. Go find godly men and learn from them, and be willing to have them say things to you that are hard to hear. One of the guys that the Lord gave me in our time in Canada to just mentor me was a guy named John McMullen. And I had made a really stupid business decision one day, and he called me up and he said, "You know what your problem is?" And I was like, "What?" And he said, you think you're too sexy for your shirt. Now, our listeners may be way too young to understand what that reference is coming from, but it was doubly funny because this guy was like a Bob Jones grad. And I was like, how do you even know what that song is?
Do you want to sing it for us so our listeners know what you're talking about?
Yeah, I can do that. I'm too sexy for my shirt.
That's good.
Too sexy. There you go. And after chuckling for like 5 seconds, I was a puddle on the phone call.
Wow.
Because he had pressed it on my heart. And again, went and printed off something called the 50 Fruit of Pride, and went and one by one, I remember sitting with Aaron in our home and going, like, do you think this about me? And I would read each 50, and like, honestly, guys, 49 of the 50 applied to me.
Oh, wow.
And then the most audacious, rude, proud comment came out about the 50th not applying to me. And I was like, are you kidding me? I am so proud and so arrogant that even as the Lord's revealing my sin. And that all happened because of a conversation with an elder who was a mentor, like a big brother to me, being willing to say hard things to me. And I needed to hear it. I still need to hear those things. You don't arrive once you're in your 40s or 50s or 60s. You need to surround yourself with people who are willing to say hard things. Do that in your 20s, no matter what you desire to do with your life. Find godly men and women who can speak into your life, who are 1 or 2 stages ahead of you.
Amen. That's good. Sean, you got anything else?
All I was going to say is I think we might need to do a part 2, because I do have many more questions, but I think we're out of time. So we should probably close this down.
Yeah. Ryan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.